Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Victor Davis Hanson.
We only have about an hour, so. Good evening, everyone. You might know me as John Heubusch. I have the honor of being the executive director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Thank you for coming this evening. In honor of our men and women who defend our freedom around the world, if you'd please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Well, as we get started, there's a couple that I'd like to recognize in the audience today. You will recognize him, one of the best governors that California's ever had, Pete Wilson and his wife, Gail. Before we get started with our event this evening, some of you, like me, might have looked around the auditorium and asked yourself the same question I did. How is it that, of all people, a classics professor can fill an auditorium like this? This was not an easy ticket to get if you waited more than a few days. Hundreds of people had to be turned away, unfortunately. But when one considers that this scholar, this honored fellow, this syndicated columnist, this award-winning academic, this political commentator, this presidential appointee, and this author of 24 previous books is Victor Davis Hanson, well, then the question answers itself. I don't know if there are any former fortunate students of Professor Hanson here tonight. If so, all of us envy you. Most of us gathered here have only gotten to know Victor Davis Hanson not through semesters of academic study and personal interaction. Rather, we have had to settle for the all too brief appearances from afar on Fox News, for example, or perhaps read his scholarly papers, articles, editorials, book reviews, and of course his own books. They cover a dramatic range of subjects, from the classics to military history to foreign affairs, domestic politics, and contemporary culture. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see him on TV, I actually lean in. I lean forward. It's because I want to really carefully listen to him. I know I am going to see and hear a demonstration of highly refined but practically spoken intellectual horsepower. His sweep of knowledge and history, distilled as it is into logical arguments that every one of us only wish we could so eloquently make ourselves, is the equivalent somewhat of a 2x4. But rather than hitting your liberal neighbor across the fence over the head with it, because they insist that our nation can afford the Green New Deal or free education for all, or 1,000 other such ridiculous ideas. You need only simply quote Professor Hanson to prove them wrong. Many personal injury lawsuits have been avoided this way. Today, Professor Hanson comes to us with what I think is his 25th book, called The Case for Trump. I don't often quote from book jackets, but here I cannot resist. It sums up the book so well, you have to get this book, that I believe that Professor Hanson probably wrote it himself. Let me quote. Quote, Trump alone had the instincts and energy to pursue an opening to victory, dismantle a corrupt old order, and bring long overdue policy changes at home and abroad. After decades of drift, Hanson argues that America needed an outsider like Trump to do what normal politicians would and could not do, a fact that explains the furor directed to Trump by the political and media status quo, close quote. It is a marvelous book written by an extraordinary talent. Before I introduce our guest this evening, I want you to know I did some math on your behalf. Imagine for a moment we were all students at Stanford or the US Naval Academy or Berkeley or Pepperdine, where he has taught before. Now consider that we had the rare opportunity after we all paid our tuition to elbow our way into one of his courses on any given semester. At about 12 to 15 weeks per semester, 2 classes per week, and tuition being what it is these days, divide by 2, subtract the 4, the next hour of instruction you receive would cost you somewhere between $300 to $500. Considering the fact that all of us here tonight are here for free, we are getting a real bargain. My fellow students, class is in session. Please join me in welcoming our professor, Victor Davis Hanson.
Thank you very much. I'm a little worried about the money because you might want a refund. And as I said to John, I feel like a rescue dog that's been battered the last 10 days and I found a nice home. I think I'll stay with you. But I think in the last 10 days I think I've been called in print a racist, sexist, nativist, and worse things yet, but I kind of wonder, I feel like that's not going to happen tonight, so it's so strange. Anyway.
No, I'm sure you're amongst friends, Professor, so thank you so much for coming. I read a lot of books, and this one I so enjoyed because I just have to say, if you pick this book up, every page reads like one of the best op-eds you've ever read. It is so well put together, so thank you, and I do think you'll enjoy your time here in the next many minutes, Professor. I wanted to start by reading 3 lines from an early page in your book that I hope you recognize, I bet you will, and ask to see if you might expand on it, because it's perhaps a potentially really frightening concept. You say, quote, without their overwhelming fealty or barring another transformative Reagan candidate, neither Trump nor any other contemporary Republican candidate will likely again find a pathway to the presidency.
Yeah.
Explain.
Well, at a time, let's take the Obama administration, the Republican Party at the state and local level picked up about almost 1,100 offices. And yet, in 5 out of the 6 last national elections, it lost the popular vote. It hasn't won 51% of the popular vote since Lee Atwater. You remember the Boston Harbor ad, the tank ad, all of that again. At least some of us do, because we're old enough, against Mike Dukakis. So there was something missing there in the Republican message at the presidential level. And I think part of it was that two things very quickly. One, there became a mindset that we didn't want to be called certain names, racist, sexist, homophobe, nativist, whatever it was. And so we thought by playing by the Marquess of Queensberry rules, that magnanimity would be reciprocated in kind, when in fact it was considered weakness to be exploited or condemned or pitied. And so we didn't really, and I'm thinking here of George W. Bush, who was just treated terribly between 2007 and 2008, Nazi brown shirt, and didn't respond. And so I think people felt there were two things. One, they wanted somebody who would respond. They felt that even if Trump was chemotherapy, at least he'd kill the cancer before he would the host. And the second thing was that the message, they felt that you just don't write off the interior of the United States and say it's deindustrialized, or they're deplorables, or they're clingers, or they're wacko birds, or they're crazies. That these are noble people, and you don't say that China's predetermined to run the world when one American, we have 1/3 the population of China, we have roughly 3 times the GDP. In blunt terms, one American produces goods and services the equivalent of 3 Chinese counterparts, and yet we're told all the time, China, 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 you can't do this, you can't do this. And so there were a lot of things that had to be talked about in a way that Trump did, and yet that message was very focused on the key states where the election was going to be decided: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. So, and I don't know if everybody said Trump was the only candidate that could lose to Hillary. I think he was probably the only Republican candidate that could have won, and Hillary might have been the only Democrat that could have lost. But,
Make America Great Again. I don't know how many had a chance to look at these slides as they rotated before the event began, but there were several that were campaign posters and buttons and things from Ronald Reagan's campaign in 1980, in which Ronald Reagan said, and strongly advertised, "Let's make America great again." Now, knowing that, my sense is what the media is doing is they're viewing, whether it's the hat or the statement or whatever, that this is President Trump's way of wanting to take America back, like to the 1950s, pre-civil rights, pre-Me Too, pre-women's rights, pre-all those things. And that's essentially what one ought to read into those 4 letters or 4 words. Is that your view? Is that the way you think this is playing itself out? And is that your view of where you think Donald Trump wants to take the country?
I don't think he wants to take it back to the pre-civil. You're confirmed with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said just that Ronald Reagan was a racist not very long ago, as well as FDR. No, I think that what he's trying to say, let's make America great, is in the narrowest sense, there's no reason why the United States should not achieve annualized GDP of 3% since 2006. And why can't we have a record low minority unemployment and record near 3.7, 3.8, almost record peacetime unemployment? And who says that there is such a thing as peak oil, and perhaps maybe we can add 3 million barrels of oil production so there was no artificially imposed politically correct limits. And then he looked at a time where he felt that this country, when Reagan was governor, was about, so I don't like to use those terms because we're all mixed up in many families, and they don't really mean it very much unless you're Elizabeth Warren and you have a DNA test. But we were about 90% so-called white, and then maybe 10% so-called African American and Latino. But in every culture that has a dominant population, there's problems. there is in Iraq, there's a war. What was unique about the United States that was baked into our founding, that all men are created equal. So you had a constant process of self-correction and self-criticism, and we were evolving into what had happened with the Italian experience, where Italians came, they were mostly democratic, and today if your name is Giuliani or Pelosi, you don't know by your ethnic cachet, you can't tell. And that was the goal, and I think we were working toward that. And so when Trump says that, I think he thinks that race or ethnicity should be incidental, not essential to your persona. But what's happened, that almost everything is politicized in ethnic or identity politics term, that immigration has now become a demographic club to beat the opposition with, and that we're supposed to self-identify as I'm a Latino, I'm gay, I'm this, I'm that. And I understand everybody has pride in some kind of identification, but it should be, I'm an American citizen, and what's unique about that, what's really unique about this country is that none of us can go to China and be fully accepted as Chinese. You can't go to Mexico and be fully accepted as a Mexican citizen unless you look like the majority population. I can tell you, as someone who's lived overseas for 3 years, I could never be fully accepted as Greek because I don't look Greek. And yet this is a country where we've come so far, and that your appearance, your superficial appearance, is not as important as your embrace of constitutional shared values. And yet the very thing that we're so good at is what people most criticize us for. So I think Trump was trying to say, I'm going to stop all that, and I'm going to try to get back to the melting pot. And being Trump, he wasn't subtle about that. Yeah.
So on that very topic of subtlety, politics is often the art of language. And, if everyone in this audience, when you think Ronald Reagan, many think of him as the great communicator. Boy, could he use words, right? In your book, you talk about when President Trump uses words, oftentimes, I think you quote, clumsily exaggerates. Trump's being Trump like Reagan was Reagan. If you could wave a magic wand and all of a sudden Trump could be this remarkable communicator and sensitive with his tweets and things like that, would Trump be Trump? I'm trying to determine if this is someone, yeah, sure, we'll fix him, but I don't know that Trump would be Trump.
I tend to agree with that, and everybody who has bet on the opposite point of view, saying if he would just stop tweeting, if he would just expand his vocabulary beyond 1,000 words, or if he would just say there are more adjectives in the English language than awesome, tremendous, or adverbs like bigly. But I think you're right. I think what Trump is, in all of his Twitter wars, he's reactive. He rarely starts a fight. He didn't start with Colin Kaepernick. He didn't even start with his probably most notorious one with John McCain. I thought it was a mistake for him to besmirch John McCain, but McCain had called his supporters crazies, and Trump was reacting to that when he was asked about it. So he's reactive, and he tries to bring more mega-tongage in the reply than the attacker. And then you're very unwise, because most people have a self-image, and Trump's actually been in a wrestling match physically. So if you want to get into a wrestling match with him, you're going to lose, because he doesn't care. He's been in it, and he doesn't have a sense of, everybody has a positive sense of self, but it reminds me, I said to somebody in New York, if you were to rate A, B, and C, D party lists, where would the Trumps be? And he said F. And I thought that was one of the reasons I liked it. And there was something, have you noticed and I mentioned this, but when Trump went places, he had this tie and the hair and everything. So if he was in Alabama or Bakersfield or Flint, Michigan, he had the same Queen's accent. He was authentically Trump. When Hillary went to the South or New England. It was you all and Boilermakers and bowling. When Obama went in the inner city, he sounded like he could drop his G's. When John Kerry was running, he had camouflage and ducks by the neck. And I asked, he came to Tulare, California, and I thought, even Trump's going to have to wear a cowboy hat. But no, he just stood out. He had his suit, the long tie, and the Queen's accent. So people did what nobody thought would be possible. How could people identify as a populist, a Manhattan billionaire with a Queen's accent who had very little... He pulled off appearing more authentically populist than a real populist like John Kasich, who grew up, as he always reminded us, as the son of a postman. So there are so many paradoxes that we haven't really figured them all out yet with Trump.
You know, I'm not sure. I think Trump invented that. He certainly is quite used to the term fake news. And, you know, I've watched from the very start as he used that expression. It was, you know, well, it's this news he either doesn't like or he thinks it's just plain not written fairly. That's what, you know, to Trump is fake news. But I got the sense that as he started getting more and more successful in convincing people that these news stories are just plain unfair and called it fake news, the media took the bait. And it feels to me like, as much as they dislike Trump, they now have pressed editorial into news reporting, and they really, he's positioned them as the enemy, and they've positioned him as the enemy. The second part is what's surprising to me, that almost en masse, the American media would step across the line and show a visceral hatred in news reporting. Have you seen a precedent for that? I mean,
No, and we can say things, but there is data. The liberal Shorenstein Center at Harvard said that the first 6 months, which has been worse, was 85% negative coverage. Obama was only 45 and then got much better, and Trump's down to 90% in these 6 months block. We've never seen movie stars that compete, whether it's Johnny Depp or Robert De Niro or Madonna or Kathy Griffin. They have a competition whether they can decapitate him, burn him, blow him up, stab him. And then we've never seen the administrative state or the progressive media nexus. The moment he's elected, let's sue to abort his presidency in 3 states by the voting machines. No, let's try to persuade the electors not to follow their constitution. Remember those ads, don't vote for him. And then almost immediately 60 plus House representatives introduced articles of impeachment before he'd said a word. And then we had the Logan Act that's calcified, we don't use it. Then it was the 25th Amendment that he was crazy, they had a psychiatrist testify. And then we had the Mueller, the hysteria about collusion with the steel fabricated stuff. And then we had the Mueller, September 5th of last year, we had Anonymous, and the New York Times, remember, said he's actively, along with loyal Americans, trying to thwart the president. I don't know what the McCabe, Rosenstein, do you guys know? It was kind of an in-palace coup where they were going to, you know, sort of take a straw poll of the cabinet before declaring him crazy and removing an elected president. So the answer is no, we've never seen that. And I think the media missed 2 really important things about Trump. The first is that they just thought he was crude or blunt, but he could at times display a level of self-deprecation and even humor and empathy that, because it was such a contrast with his public image, that it was quite effective. He went all through the Midwest, and I noticed he started saying things that no Republican had ever said. He said, I'm worried about our vets. I'm worried about not the farmers, our farmers. I'm worried about our machinists. I'm worried that our. He got to West Virginia, and Hillary Clinton had come in and said, well, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to bankrupt the coal industry. You're going to have to find new jobs. And he said, I love big, beautiful coal. Nobody in his right mind would say big, beautiful coal. He didn't care if it was political. He wanted to display an empathy, and he carried that state by almost 70%. And then finally, very quickly, they don't understand the Nietzschean concept of survival. What Nietzsche said, anything that doesn't kill me makes me stronger. So even independents are looking at him now, and I have members of my family that didn't vote for him, but they will concede that at the age of 72, to get up after 4 or 5 hours of sleep and hear your wife defamed, your young son, your adult children defamed, hear that you're a crook, a tax cheat, the stormy down, all of that, and yet get up every morning as if it's a new day and keep fighting. There's a begrudging respect for that. My wife reminded me of that. I came home 2 days ago and I said, God, this guy called me a Nazi. And this other guy said I was a racist. And I said, a guy on the plane wanted me to sign a book. He saw me and I signed it, and then he put it back and hid it under the seat. And he said, it's like a red MAGA hat. I can't show this. And I said, God, I don't know if I can take it. And she said, oh, shut up, Eeyore. You're writing about a guy who takes more in one day than you in your whole life. So get with it. So.
In history, as you know, the country's sometimes been divided north-south. It's the way we've often looked at politics, things like that. But in your book, you go to some length to talk about what you call, I don't even know if it's your words, but a forgotten interior. Yeah. And it's a real expose on the coast versus the interior of this nation, and that's where the new divide seems to be. Here's my question on it. I get the sense from reading your book that you feel that Trump saw this and from a strategic perspective took advantage of it and followed a plan along those lines in order to win. Yeah. And when I read that, I thought, just like it's tough for him to put together a sentence, yet still run a country, I was surprised to, at least to maybe between the lines, it felt like you were implying that Trump was a strategist, that he had this in mind and executed against it. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if it was just really his raw instincts, or did he really actually pursue a strategy to go here, go there, and take it?
I think it was a mixture of both. I think that, first of all, he's considered himself an outsider, an outer borough, Queens accent person that was garish and loud, would never be accepted in the Manhattan elite, and he wanted to be, and he thought that was unfair, that he felt by the basis of merit and his buildings that he deserved more recognition. So there was a constant sort of anger at the elite of New York, and that made him a little bit more empathetic. He was a builder. He was not a high-tech guy, a financier, a media mogul. In other words, he dealt with concrete physical things, and thereby, by extension, people who laid cement and tilers and unions. So he understood he couldn't build a building unless those guys were good and happy. And I think that gave him a level of insight about the other America. But he also had 16 very gifted rivals, far more gifted than the 2008 or 12 field, and he had to distinguish himself. And then I think he did notice, with an innate cunning, that they were sort of emulating the Democratic playbook, that America had changed, that they were going to give an identity politics, or I think when Jeb said illegal immigration is basically it's an act of love, and they were sort of progressive light, and he saw an opening that he could double down, especially when his advisors told him that there was about 5 to 8 million people, and I don't know what we would call them, John, maybe the Reagan voter, the silent majority, the Perot voter, the Tea Party, that didn't want to come out and vote for Mitt Romney and probably didn't come out for it. If you do the math, that didn't mean that he was going to win these states by a lot, but if he were to get them to come out and they would vote 80%, then he could flip these states that nobody thought could be flipped by 60, 80,000 votes, less than 1% in some cases. Michigan, Wisconsin, you almost flipped Minnesota, Ohio, ensure Iowa and Indiana, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. And the message was, I guess if I would boil it down, is that under globalization, anybody's labor, physical labor, muscularity that could be Xeroxed abroad was. on the principle of, you're replaceable. That was sort of crass, but then the left, or even some people in the Republican Party, reversed cause and effect. They thought because your labor could be Xerox cheaper for machinery or manufacturing, therefore you were somehow culpable. I think somebody in the National Review, Kevin Williamson, said you've got to get in a pickup and just, it's your own fault, it's toxic culture. And they reversed the cause and effect, and almost as if losers who took opiates drove away factories, when it was just the opposite. And so he understood that that area had lost. I mean, Detroit in 1945 was the fastest growing major city in the United States by some calibrations. Its symphony museums were the finest in the United States. It had some of the highest per capita wealth. Hiroshima was in ruins by September 1st, 1945. If you go to Hiroshima today, it looks like Detroit should have been, and Detroit looks like it was nuked. And that wasn't because of a war, it was because of globalization and changes in policy and government, big government. But what I'm getting at is that he understood that the message of the forgotten man had electoral ramifications. He also had a lot of people who were in the shadows that we felt had been kind of losers themselves or eccentrics. I mean especially Steve Bannon, who might not have been a steady, sober, and judicious advisor, but when they brought him on, he really honed that idea of the forgotten man and a nationalist, populist tweak. We shouldn't be too exaggerated. 80% of the Trump message, deregulation, judges, pipeline construction, GDP, tax reform, try to repeal Obama, was purely Republican conservatism. It was that tweaking of Bannon and others. And then people like Peter Thiel. I was at a dinner once and he happened to be there, and there was a very prominent American whose name I won't mention, but tore into me for voting. I was about to vote for Trump. And he said, well, he's a loser, he has no analytics. Hillary has the smartest, the best, and the brightest. These are wonkish, these are millennials. And Mr. Thiel turned to him and said, no, actually, Trump has the best analytics in the world. He said, he does? He said, yes, he's concentrating on the only states that matter, and we know everybody. He said, how would you know? And he said, I designed them. And so there were people who helped that campaign in various ways that didn't get a lot of credit, but deserve a lot of credit.
Like Reagan was a transitional, transformative president, there's no doubt about it. You also noted that Trump picked up on 80% of what's been the Reagan Republican playbook for many years. Do you think that what Trump is succeeding in doing will he be viewed in the future as a transformational president?
It's very hard to tell, because let's take Ronald Reagan at the beginning of 1983. We were still in recession. He was trying to break inflation. We had been so desperate to break it, we had whip inflation now buttons. And I was farming. I remember in '83, I went to the production credit. We had a family farm, and I thought I was so lucky to get a 13% loan. And I bought a used pickup for 19.5%. I thought that was high. And then I had sulfur bags that I'd ordered sulfur, and I noticed that it said $4.99, $5.99, $6.99. They crossed out the price. The inflation was so high that they were marking them up in their inventory. And that was when Reagan was president. And then I noticed every time you turned on the TV in '83, if you remember, there was a Hollywood movie about the end of days that Ronald Reagan was going to cause a nuclear winter. I think Carl Sagan was always hectoring us about Reagan. So Trump is at that position now. And Reagan took a lot of heat and broke the back of inflation, restored fiscal sobriety. But it took really, if you look at November of 1983 and you go back and look at polls, the unnamed Democratic candidate was running sort of neck and neck. And then between November of 1983 and November of 1984, the economy grew at 7% GDP. It's absolutely stunning. And then it wasn't even close. So we'll see one of the problems in writing a book is that the news changes, so you have to trust historical instinct and analytics and not get caught up in the 24-hour. But so I tried to suggest that the measures that he's taken, I think, are going to make him a very successful president. And he has that Reagan-esq tendency. One of the things I liked about Reagan is that people told him all the time he couldn't do something. You can't say, tear down that wall. You can't call it an evil empire. And his attitude, well, it's evil and it's an empire, why not? And that's what Trump is. You know, Trump, you can't get out of the Iran deal. You cannot move the embassy to Jerusalem. The Council on Foreign Relations will have a fit if you get out of the Paris Climate Accord, that kind of stuff. And he doesn't care. And that empowers him.
Yeah. You talk in the book at some length about this concept, the electronic lynch mob,
Yeah.
the social media that permeates our society today. As it relates to that particular phenomena in this specific case involving this young fellow, Nick Sandman, in the Covington Catholic School, I see that there's some real serious attorneys that are going after the media, a lot of the media,
Yeah.
to redress this. Knowing what you know in our society, do you think that they might possibly succeed, or is this going to be dismissed and we move on?
Well, I was fortunate to grow up with, my mother was the second Superior Court judge woman in California, and I think the second appellate court. So I always got lectures about the law, and she always would say, I wish it were true that cases are decided by the letter of the law, but so often the political atmospherics, they affect judges, they affect everything. And there was something about that young kid standing there, being hectored by this person who had fabricated almost everything about his life, beating his drum, and then that electronic lynch mob that made him an especially sympathetic character. And so he was overwhelmingly, he won the sympathy of the country. But I think what we lacked there is that when we used to watch Westerns and when the mob went to the jail to break in and lynch the suspect, there was always a sheriff with a double-barrel shotgun. We didn't have anybody like this. In fact, I really liked the editor and the publisher of National Review, but I almost came pretty close to resigning because we had a big fight. Not that they were on my side, but some people, as you know, in National Review were part of the lynch mob. And I thought that was just intolerable, that without any evidence. And I remarked on it that day, but I did watch 6 or 7 hours of the video, and anybody with any cognition could see that what the story was. And then when he said that he gave the dates of Vietnam, you knew that anybody who knew the history of the Vietnam War knew that it was impossible for him to be a combat veteran. You saw the other things he said, and yet there's a deep illness in this country. And it's mostly from wealthy white liberal people who want to virtue signal their own moral superiority and as they damn white privilege. And they did that with Sandy. And they always do it at the expense of the working class white person who doesn't have white privilege. It's almost like somebody in Malibu can say, I'm so sick of the white privilege of that welder in Tulare. And therefore, by saying that, then he gets to have that big fence around his estate and have Hispanic help, and he's exempt because he said that. And there was all this virtue signaling. Everybody was damning this Sandy man. And I was in a board meeting of a philanthropic organization, and somebody happened to say, this was atrocious, and we didn't even know that one of the members had actually tweeted to condemn this kid. So it was widespread, and conservatives, many of the conservative establishment were just as guilty as progressive. And I really got upset about that, as I did with the Jussie Smollett case. That was another example that sort of, wasn't that kind of the ultimate trajectory of identity politics? Because what he was saying to America was, I'm going to create the most unlikely, impossible, illogical scenario in the world, and I'm going to make America believe it because they're so deranged that I can get away with it. And so it wasn't just I'm African American, but I'm going to be African American and gay. I'm not just going to be African American gay, I'm going to be African American and I'm going to hate Trump. I'm not going to be just African American and hate Trump, I'm going to be young and hip on empire. I'm not just going to do all that, but I'm going to be walking at 2 a.m. And I'm not just going to be walking at 2 a.m. I'm going to see two white guys who happen to be prowling around liberal Chicago. Not just two white guys who are doing it. They're going to have a MAGA hat on. And they're not just going to have a MAGA hat on. Two white guys with a MAGA hat in liberal Chicago are going to say, we're going to prowl around because maybe Jesse Smollett, whom we immediately recognize and yell out as the enemy of Empire, because we always watch Empire, and Bob says to Fred, let's go out and look for Jesse Smollett type people tonight. And by the way, let's take some lynch rope with us. And then and if that's not enough, let's get bleach that freezes at 5 degrees and we'll throw it and defy the laws of chemistry. It won't freeze in our case. And then not only will we do all that, we'll beat him up, and we're very big, but Juicy's very small, but he's a better fighter, and he's going to fight us off while he's got his sandwich in one hand and his cell phone in the other, recording the whole thing. That's what we were asked to believe, and the nation did. And so, I think that was I think historians will look at that point and say that is about the limitations of identity politics, and after that point it becomes a caricature, because that was factually impossible to believe, and yet we wanted to believe because we wanted to say that MAGA Trump supporters did this, and there was no possible theoretical, abstract way it was possible, and yet we wanted to believe because we were full of such hatred. And then what was really strange about it was the therapeutic response. What made him do it? Who drove him to this? He's obviously disturbed. I'm thinking, no, he just libeled half the country. And people were walking around, and that he contributed to a hatred of a particular person based on their race. And yet, there's no contrition. He's still peddling this fantasy.
Yeah, so to that exact point, what I wanted to ask you, okay, given your extraordinary description of events that took place, was that so singularly ridiculous that you think the incident could somehow play like an outsize or just be a giant influence in some respects on the 2020 election?
Yeah, I do. I think they're cumulative as well. I mean, there was the Virginia false rape accusation. There was the Duke lacrosse incident. There was the Kavanaugh hearing when finally Lindsey Graham had his have you no decency moment, as Robert Welch did in McCarthy. And then we had the Covington and the Juicy Smollett. I think now people are so vaccinated to that they don't believe it anymore. Whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But I think that they feel that there's a large number of people in the United States, not a majority, but a very influential minority that exercises influence and power far beyond their numbers. And they control the universities, they control entertainment, Hollywood, professional sports, the foundations, the media, and they're not empirical, and they feel that they don't just want to marginalize conservatives, they want to destroy them and want to destroy what they represent. And I don't think that's exaggeration. When Ocasio-Cortez said that the country was we don't have to be 10% better than garbage, and that FDR was a racist, I thought to myself, well, I understand that the United States had racist tendencies, as all majority populations do, but it was already self-correcting. And that's the story of the United States, trying to become better. And I thought to myself, so all these people that Ocasio-Cortez never even heard of rotted on the beaches of Taro, or they were blown up in a B-17, or they froze to death at Choice and Roosevelt. And they did it for what? For this little person to come here and say to them, you have a garbage country? I don't think people have to put up with that. I don't think that I don't think they have to put up with it. And I think the reason that her parents came to this country is they understood something that she didn't. That's the really interesting question. Why would you leave Puerto Rico, or why would you leave Somalia and come here if immediately upon arrival you and your children immediately have grievances against your new country? It doesn't make any sense. I know I was named after Victor Hanson, who was killed at Okinawa in the 6th Marine Division. And I read his letters all the time, and I can't believe that he died for a country in which major people call it garbage. I just don't think that's what he died for. And each of us, according to our own station, has to speak out and say, these people didn't die for that. They didn't die in the Civil War. They died for a better America, not for some person that knows nothing about, and I say that because of her empirically from what she's been saying, to suddenly level an accusation against an entire dead generation. I'm getting very angry at this idea we attack the dead and we apply the standards of the present when most of us, in the physical sense alone, we couldn't last a day in a covered wagon, or we wouldn't have lasted one moment at Shiloh, and yet all of a sudden these people that's not why they're unhappy. It's because of our past. It's something deeper, and to blame other people or their parents or past generation for their own inability to cope, it's cowardly. And yet, the longer that we let it go on and we don't challenge it, then we become culpable ourselves. So, anyway, it's off topic.
I have one last question, and then we'd love to turn it to you in the audience to ask a few questions as well. Professor, I'm not asking you to prognosticate and make a specific prediction, but do you think that the odds that Trump will win again in 2020 are there? Are they in his favor? How do you see that?
I think it's about 55-45 for a couple of reasons, 3 or 4 reasons very quickly. He's about at 42 to 45, depending on his Twitter week. He's about where Barack Obama and Bill Clinton were at the beginning of their 3rd year. Both of them had worse midterms. Clinton lost 52 seats. Obama lost 63 seats. Obama lost 6 Senate seats. Clinton lost 8. Trump lost 39 House seats, maybe 40, and he picked up 2 seats. And then Clinton demolished Bob Dole, and Obama won handily over Mitt Romney. So history suggests that it's Trump's race to lose, that he has that power of incumbency. He's getting better, I think. His speeches are better. They're longer, but they're still better. I think he's sinking better. He had so many problems with this revolving door cabinetcies, but there's something about this new triage of Pompeo as Secretary of State and Bolton, and especially Barr. When Barr the other day was asked that ambush question about the emergency declaration, I think Jeff Sessions is a good man, but he would probably equivocate it. And who knows what Rod Rosenstein would have said. But Barr just stood up for him. And so you get the impression that they do genuinely believe in the Trump message, and that helps him. And then he's not running in a vacuum. Everybody thinks that presidents run in a vacuum. It's not it's a Manichaean choice between something sometimes good or something better, or somebody bad and somebody worse. That's what Americans do. They're pragmatists. Since 2016, probably a quarter of the people who voted for Trump just could not abide by the idea of President Clinton, Hillary Clinton. This time, it depends on, do they really want to go the Mondale 84, as I said, or 72? But when you put reparations and infanticide as permissible abortion, the new Green Deal barring the internal combustion engine, Medicare for all. I can't even remember all. 16-year-old voting. Felons can vote in Florida. Wealth tax we've never had on already taxed capital. 90% rate. You put all that basket together, and they're going to try to tar every nominee in that brutal primary to endorse that. And so Trump will be, we don't know how well they're going to tar those people, but Trump, as it looks now, will be able to say, you may not like me, but I'm the only thing standing between you and socialism or worse. And, so the idea that Joe Biden, who said that George Bush should get on TV the way that FDR did on 1929 when there was neither TV nor FDR was president, and he said everything from going to put you back in chains to I'm going to take Trump out behind the gym, and that's the sober and judicious candidate. So we'll see, but I think he has about a 55% chance. A lot of it will depend on, usually what ruins an incumbency is a economic downturn or an unpopular war or some sort of scandal. And I don't see him doing an optional military large intervention. I think the economy will survive a recession, and I think the Mueller investigation, I could go on all night, but I don't think they're going to find collusion. That was its mandate. So I think it'll be up to how well the campaign is run and how well he can tag the opposition as something we've never seen since 1932. Yeah.
Questions. If you have a question, we have several people in the audience, staff with microphones. If we could just wait to ask your question, we'll put the microphone in your hand. We'll start right here.
Thank you, Professor. Really appreciate it. I'm really enjoying also your online World War II course.
Thank you.
With Hillsdale, which is awesome. One fun question and one I've been thinking about lately. Who would you think from your military history and study kind of tactically fits Trump that you might think of as far as instinctual, covering ground, winning before the wars even fought? And then kind of a question I've been thinking about, the Bolshevik Revolution, where it wasn't too high a percentage of people that were Bolsheviks were actually in control of the message that was out there. I kind of relate that with the media today. So I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well,
just a fun.
There are people in American history that are very Trumpian. William Tecumseh Sherman said to the media on the march through Georgia, "I'm going to hang all of you if you write another thing." And then he would have. And he was considered crazy. In fact, he was relieved of command in 1862 and considered certifiably. They called it melancholy in those days. Patton, if you look at Patton's personal life, and because we're in a polite audience, I won't mention things that Patton did, but they make Trump's look pretty normal. And if you had a sober and judicious and very wonderful man like Omar Bradley, Patton's immediate superior, he was a wonderful man, but if he had been commanding Third Army and Patton was not there, we would have lost another 40,000 dead. Curtis LeMay, oh my gosh, he said, if we lose the war, I'll be tried as a war criminal. But what he meant was he took a $1 billion Manhattan project, bigger than the Manhattan Project, excuse me, the B-29, and he took it from 30,000 feet down to 7,000 feet and turned it into a veritable dive bomber because the bombs, given the jet stream and the altitude and the wear in the engine, it was not working. It was a big disaster. And he took out 120 days, 75% of the industrial capacity of Japan. And he was on the cover of Time magazine and considered a hero, and by the early 60s, he was Dr. Strangelove, a mad man that we all hated. That's sort of what Trump is. I think I said that in the book, he's a tragic hero, as long as we realize what that term means. It means somebody who's got particular skill sets that we bring in, whether it's Shane or Gary Cooper in High Noon or John Wayne and the Searchers or the Magnificent Seven, and they start to solve the problem. But as they start to solve the problem, they give us the luxury of being hypercritical and critical of the methods they do, that we consider our saviors uncouth. So I think that as the economy gets better, we have the luxury now of criticizing Trump. I don't think Trump is going to be invited to funerals as presidents are after he's out. I don't think he'll be considered I think he'll do more for the United States than most of our ex-presidents have that are alive, and yet he will not be accepted with the same respect that they are. And that's just the tragedy of somebody right out of Sophocles, or maybe Dirty Harry, huh? Yeah.
Over here.
Thank you. Test. Thank you very much. I'm really concerned about the lay of the land at the federal level, state level, for voter fraud. And I'm hoping you can perhaps share some insight on steps maybe that are in the works or can be planned to handle voter fraud.
You all know what happened in Orange County, but my congressional representative was a wonderful man, David Valdeo, from Portuguese immigrant family, and he won the midterm, I think, at about 18%. His internal polls were showing him 12 up on the election week. He won, I think, by 5 points, 6 points on election day, and he lost by 500 votes. So what happened was same-day registration and the new 2017 law that said a non-family member could go to a home, register, and have the vote and deliver it to the registrar. Hundreds of thousands of people took data from the DMV and they said these people fit a particular pattern. The DMV had said we'd mix people who were here legally with non-legally with their licenses, and he said it was only a few thousand. We don't know if that's accurate. But nevertheless, they were able to be very clever. They didn't do it in the midterms. So all these Republicans had won the midterms, or at least did better than their general election opponent, and they let down their guard, and then they were overwhelmed with this brilliant but Machiavellian strategy. In the short term, there's nothing you can do unless you start changing the laws or revert back what they were, or you sue, or you vote harvest. And by that I mean you get your own computer analytics and you say there's this many Republicans or conservative-leaning people who didn't register, or they registered and didn't vote, and I'm going to have a guy go to their home. I'm going to sit there until they hand me the ballot. That's a poor remedy for a democracy, but I don't know how you're going to do it in the short term. I'm very worried, and I think theoretically the California congressional district that's representatives only 7 now out of 52 or 53. I think we could get down to 1 or 2 with this vote harvesting. And of course, if you object to it, they've already prepped the battlefield, so you're insensitive, you're exclusionary, you're racist, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a very good question. There's no answer yet to it.
Over here.
We're very proud that you're a California resident, and as someone who's looking to leave the state because I believe strongly in a two-party system, and we don't have that here, what recommendations do you have for those of us in California who are living in a one-party state? What do you see? What hope is there?
Well, my only hope is, I guess, Herb Stein said Nixon's economic advice, anything that can't go on won't go on. So you have a state now where this was a paradise in the 70s and 80s. We had good governance, a governor here. But we have the highest basket. I think we're second, or maybe we're first with a 13.2 top rate of income tax. We're about number 3 in sales tax. Our gas tax will be number 1, most expensive. And yet when you look for commiserate advantages, many of the ratings of our infrastructure were 47, I think 48. Our high school and 8th grade test scores are about 45. We have some of the highest, second highest kilowatt rates in the United States. 3rd highest overall gasolines. I think we have 21% of the state lives below the poverty line. We have 1/3 of all welfare recipients. So whatever happened, we had the worst of both worlds. It's very expensive for the middle class to live here, and you get very little in return. And so that can't go on for much longer. When I go to Palo Alto and I see the very wealthy people who virtue signal their liberality, and they live in these expansive homes in Woodside and beautiful homes in Old Palo Alto and Atherton. Then I go back where I live in Selma, rural Fresno County, and on an August day when it's 109 outside, Hispanic families are in Walmart and they're not there to buy things. They're taking their whole family because they cannot afford to turn on the air conditioning. And that's even with lifeline rates. So it seems to me that there is a potential of a lot of emerging people of a non-traditional middle class, and they're starting to ask questions. Why do I have to pay the highest gasoline? Why do I have the highest electricity? Why is the 99 freeway a death trap? Who in the world created this debacle, Stonehenge, high-speed rail monstrosity over Fresno? Why didn't we build the 3 reservoirs? These are not right-wing people asking those questions. And when they start, I think they'll start to resemble at some point the rebellions we had with the Reagan Revolution in the 60s and 70s. But we're not there yet. It has to get a little worse, I'm afraid, before they get angry. But I know a lot of people, I have Mexican-American people within my family, and a lot of people are asking questions that are very embarrassing. Why is Dianne Feinstein attacking Catholicism? Why is Kamala Harris attacking the Knights of Columbus? Who dreamed up the idea you could kill a baby and call it abortion? Who told us that transgendered restrooms were the most important thing in California? So we'll see what happens, but that constituency, I'm not sure, won't gradually become a little bit more conservative.
We have time for 2 more questions. I'm going to go here.
Thank you. Given your knowledge and the parallels you've given us today and written about in your book, let's imagine for a minute that Ronald Reagan was alive and here and could actually give President Trump some advice. What do you imagine that would be?
Well, they hated, we forget now the degree to which they hated Reagan. And I was shocked that when George W. Bush came to Hoover and gave a nice speech, but I don't think he realized how much they hated him. Just in 2007 and 8, they called him a Nazi. They wrote articles about killing him. But Reagan, they really hated, but Reagan had that, and I don't know as much nearly as the people here at the Reagan Library, but he had a unique ability to smile and laugh it off. And he had a winning character and a personality. So Trump has elements of that. During the Kavanaugh hearing, you remember that moment? It was the best moment he's had in his presidency. Someone said, well, you think Kavanaugh drank too much? He said, I don't know, but I know that if I did, I'd be a total disaster. Can you imagine me with alcohol? That's why that was kind of off the cuff Reagan. And if Trump were, I think Reagan would tell him, I know that I had the establishment finally behind me, but I was a renegade in 68 and 76 when I tried to get the nomination, and they said I was crazy. So I've gone through what you have, but you've got to be a little bit, you've got to have some moment in your life where you can disarm your critics through calmness or laughter or jocular language rather than just go for the jugular every single time. And then I think Trump would say, yeah, it's easy for you to say, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Last question, I'm sorry, but we'll go up here, a friend in the balcony.
Professor Hanson, a piece of strategic advice. If the election was being held right now, what would you suggest to President Trump should be his major slogan or message?
His main slogan?
Correct.
Other than I saved you all. I would say it's something like America's great again, something like that. But what he really needs to do is that, I think I get frustrated because everybody who doesn't have any responsibility has all these ideas whose consequences we never suffer if they go bad. But what I would suggest to him is that the Democratic Party is so front-loaded into identity politics and tribalism that they've lost the white working classes, whether they like it or not. the percentages are astounding. And the number of people who don't have college degrees we know now is larger than the people who do. And college is getting a hit even more with this admittance scandal. But what I'm getting at is that Trump has done more for minority voters than Obama ever did. We have record low black unemployment. We have record low Hispanic unemployment. Abortion has devastated the African American. Jesse Jackson, of all people, called it genocide. No person has been more adamantly against the present abortion practices than Donald Trump. And that's been very good for minorities, that message. He's not anti-religious, he's not anti-Semitic, he's not anti-Catholic, and those strains are deeply now embedded within the Democratic Party. Closing the border and having legal, meritocratic, measured, and diverse immigration helps entry-level workers. It doesn't cut their wages through cash off the books, undercutting labor. So he's got a lot of winning arguments for the minority. And what I'm getting at is that he doesn't need to win 40% of the African-American vote or 50% of the Latino vote. For those people who identify themselves as Latinos or African, he just needs 20%, 15% of the African-American vote. 40%, and the Democrats, their whole calculus is shattered because they've lost this old working class Hubert Humphrey worker. So that's what I really like to see him do, is go out with spokespeople and go into the inner city. He'd be booed, but if he just keeps his cool, I think it would pay enormous dividends. And he's already starting to do that a little bit. I hope he continues. That's what most frightens the Democratic Party. Thank you.
I really want you to stick around, if you can, to visit with Professor Hanson and get this book. It's going to be one of the best books you've read in years. So,
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.